So I first started studying age-delayed macular degeneration by accident. When I was in graduate school, I was tasked with trying to understand why older adults had difficulty seeing at night. At that time, and this was the early 1990s, it was well understood that as we grow older, our pupil size becomes smaller with age, and we have the beginning of cataracts, which reduces the amount of light entering the eye. So these optical sources of night vision problems were very well understood by optometrists. But it was really unknown whether or not the retina aged and deteriorated with age. So we began to investigate dark adaptation, or night vision, how fast your eyes adjust from daylight to darkness, to really look just at the neural retina and understand whether or not it deteriorated. And so we built our own dark adaptometer, and I'll never forget it. The third patient that I ever tested over the age of 60 came in. His night vision wouldn't recover. I'm sitting there, and back then research protocols took a long time. So it took about a half an hour to measure someone's dark adaptation, maybe 40 minutes, in a normal person. And so I'm watching this person very slowly recover. And at 90 minutes, I turned the machine off because I just didn't want to do it to the patient anymore. And so then the question became, what's going on with this patient? And so we sent the patient to a retina specialist, actually 2 retina specialists, and the retina specialist said that the person was completely normal. And we took fundus photographs of the back of the eye, and we sent them to the Wisconsin Reading Center, which was the forerunner of the AREDS Reading Center. And they graded the photos as being normal. So they had no other comorbid medical conditions, and so this patient's normal, but yet had clinically abnormal dark adaptation. We had no idea why. And so, I took that patient and I stuck him in my desk drawer, the folder in the desk drawer. And at the end of my dissertation, in which we documented these aging-related changes, I found 5 such individuals that were over the age of 60, had completely normal retinas by every measure, except they had clinically abnormal dark adaptation. And the question became, why? Why? And it's not a question that we knew the answer to for another 4 years. A colleague of mine, Christine Curcio, she was in the same building as me, but she was focused on evaluating patients with AMD that had donated their eye to science. What she found was that rods die before cones in age-delayed macular degeneration. And most physicians do not realize this, but actually rods outnumber cones in the macula 9-to-1. So although the macula is cone enriched and very important for our detailed vision, it is actually rod dominated. And they are the photoreceptors that are first affected. And so we have to pay particular attention to the health and well-being of rods in order to diagnose and manage this disease in its earliest state. A few years later, Christine discovered the lesions that occur before you can see drusen, called basal linear and basal laminar deposits. And they're largely cholesterol deposits that form in the back of the eye. And out of these deposits, which coat the back of the eye, sprout drusen. And what you learn is drusen is just the tip of the iceberg of these lesions that had been there for years. And when she made this discovery, it was about the time, it was 4 or 5 years later, and we pulled these patients out from my dissertation that were clinically abnormal in their dark adaptation, and all of them developed macular degeneration. And that's when we really understood that what we were looking at in these patients was Christine was finding in the donor tissue, which was subclinical AMD. These were seminal discoveries. I did what all crazy scientists do. I went to every major company and said, hey, we have a great opportunity for you. There hadn't been a new technology in a while, especially in the visual function space, so you should create a modern dark adaptometer because you can use it to find AMD with a high degree of accuracy, and then doctors could use that to manage the disease. And they said, oh yeah, that's nice, Greg. Yeah, great idea. Yeah, and they were right, because I didn't realize it was going to take 10 years to develop the technology, but I was crazy enough to do it. And the reason for that was I got very frustrated. So at that time, if you were a subject in my research, I would spend 4 to 6 hours with you easily, because we were doing all these questionnaires and and visual function measurements, and we'd have to give you a break for lunch, but you basically came in and spent the day with us. So we really got to know our research participants, and I'm really grateful for them for sharing with us, because I kept hearing a story. I kept hearing their story about their first diagnosis. And invariably, it went something like this, which was, at the time, I was at UAB, and they would always tell a story about, well, I was out working in my yard, and my vision got blurry. And I thought I just overdid it. So, I went inside in the air conditioning, and, I rested, and 2 or 3 days later, my vision was still blurry, and then I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, for the first time, I have age-related macular degeneration, and I have bleeding in that eye. And, I'm legally blind in that eye. And, from Christine's work, we knew that the patient had the disease for many, many years before they were diagnosed. And I just couldn't understand why these patients weren't being diagnosed. Because even back then, we knew there was things that we could do to try to slow the progression of the disease. But these patients were left untreated and already, diagnosed with advanced disease. And I'll never forget the day that I thanked a research participant for participating, and I had to walk back into the room to get their patient chart. And I walked into the room, and I stared at this Humphrey field analyzer, which is a visual field machine used for glaucoma that we hacked into a dark adaptometer. And I just looked at it and I said, this is crazy. Doctors use technology to find and manage glaucoma effectively. Why isn't there this technology for AMD? We need to do this. By April 2004, we licensed the technology to the company that became Maculogix. That began a 10-year, called my unofficial MBA, 10 years of development, of taking this 90-minute test into what we wanted to be a 5-minute test. And then, very proud day, was in April of 2014, nearly 10 years to the day that the license was awarded, we delivered our first AdaptEX to our first private practice clinician, who wasn't going to do research with it, was actually going to use it to find and manage their AMD patients. And it's really gratifying as a scientist that was fortunate enough to make something that's actually useful in the clinic, to hear now patient stories of saving vision, about how the doctor didn't know that they had AMD because they had 20/20 visual acuity. They didn't have many drusen, or they were easy to miss, but the dark adaptometer allowed them to understand that there was something going on. And then with proper management, 20/20 vision was the outcome when they were sent to the retina specialist, not 20/80, not 20/100. Story after story. It's remarkable. But then there's the next chapter. Can we speed adoption by making the technology even easier to use? So you don't need a special room. It's more comfortable. And that's where Bill McPhee, our CEO, came up with a really brilliant idea that we should make this a wearable. I fainted, as he says, and when I came to, I realized that we were going to have to do this. It was the right thing to do. We took these two concepts of a wearable and automating it with artificial intelligence, and that led to the AdaptEX Pro, guided by Thea. The research effort to develop the AdaptEX Pro and Thea was extraordinary. We were very fortunate to have some very good partners. In the early days, we used Artifact, a product development house, to really understand what our customer needed and really spent a lot of time in customer discovery. And then we partnered with an outstanding engineering firm called NPR Associates. They did a phenomenal amount of work. We had dozens of engineers working on this product. We were doing more than a man-year every month of this program. Their scalability and expertise is unsurpassed. And then we made a large investment in Maculogix R&D. We have a super engineering team that has been working nearly around the clock over the last few months to get this product to the market. We have spent over 14 man-years in the last 2 calendar years on this product and have invested well over $10 million to be able to deliver just an exquisite product in a record amount of time. The AdaptEX Pro will change the future of AMD care because it will make it scalable. Now, every patient that deserves to know whether or not they have macular degeneration can find out. But more broadly, it's going to change the future of optometry because this kind of platform technology is going to be considered standard in the next 10 years.